Now, I think it obviously goes without saying that it's been an interesting ride for Star Wars under the Disney banner thus far. There's been good, there's been bad, and there's certainly been controversial. And I oftentimes think of a quote from the movie The Dark Knight when thinking about Disney's handling of the franchise, when the Joker asks Harvey Dent if he really looks like a guy with a plan, and then goes on to say that he's like a dog chasing cars. He wouldn't know what to do with one if he caught it, and that he just does things. In other words, Disney was just so eager to get their hands on the property on Star Wars and to start making money from it that they never gave any real thought beforehand about how to approach it, what to do with it, what kind of long-term plan should they have in place before even starting their first project. They just jumped right in and started making a sequel trilogy without any consideration as to the multiple ways there might be ramifications to that down the road. For example, they didn't seem to give any thought to the ramifications of making Luke the last Jedi. They didn't think about what sort of issues would arise for other parts of Star Wars or the greater story by making Luke fail to rebuild the Jedi Order, and for all the students he'd find and to try to train to end up killed, save Kylo Ren, of course, who did that killing. They didn't think about or realize the ramifications that such a decision would have on that 30 years on the timeline leading up to the sequels, that people aren't going to be so interested in the story of Luke Skywalker anymore during that 30 years if he ultimately ends up a failure or everything leads to failure. Even though, ironically enough, once upon a time, it was that very story, the story of Luke, that more or less drove the expanded universe. In many ways, it succeeded because it was all about his lasting legacy, and the legacy of all the heroes of the original trilogy, of course. And without even thinking about it, Disney threw that all away, the chance to retell Luke's heroic story over those 30 years. But perhaps an even greater irony still is that Grogu, who I think is hands down the most popular original character in the Disney era, is now a trainee of Luke Skywalker. Their most beloved new character is now fated to have to die for this sequel trilogy to make sense, or for it to be truly dramatic when we're led to believe that Luke really is the last Jedi, and that Rey and Rey alone is the last hope for the galaxy. Now, don't get me wrong here, I don't think for the sake of the sequels they're going to kill off Grogu anytime soon, if ever, considering he could theoretically live for hundreds and hundreds of years and be a continuous thread in pretty much any Star Wars project or story set in the future of the galaxy. Just like Yoda is being used that way in reverse, he's part of the High Republic story currently going on, which is set 200 years before the prequels. Nevertheless, again, I'm sure they won't let the story of the sequels get in the way of all they can do with Grogu, that he will survive somehow. He survived the first great Jedi Purge after all, so why not another one? I mean, there's just no way they'll kill him off when there's so much money to be made from him yet. Similar to what was done with Groot from Marvel, they'll have to show us or use Groot at several different points in his life to make the most of him. We've already had baby Grogu, so we'll have to have teenage Grogu, then adult Grogu, and then ancient Jedi Master Grogu, and so on. But anyway, here, getting back to it, arguably the biggest mistake Disney, or Lucasfilm under Disney, has made with Star Wars, and maybe the biggest mistake they could ever make, actually, was getting the sequel trilogy wrong. Not only was it perhaps the most anticipated thing there will ever be in the history of Star Wars, to get sequels to that original trilogy, and to see what happens next for all these beloved characters, but along those same lines, it was also the direct continuation of the story started by George Lucas. More than anything else, I'd say they just had to get this right. They had to finish off the saga started by Lucas well. Better than well, really. They had to get this thing near perfect, though you could certainly argue Return of the Jedi already did that, and we didn't need the sequels at all, and that Disney should have never tried to make them, or they shouldn't have called their films the sequel trilogy, but whatever, I guess, it's too late for all that. And look, as I've said many, many times before, so many you're probably sick of me saying it, you can love the sequel trilogy if you want to. That's absolutely fine. I have no beef with you if you think they're the best 3 Star Wars movies there could ever be. I just disagree with you, and once upon a time I think most of us had the ability to agree to disagree, but I digress. But anyway, even if you love it, you have to admit that the sequel trilogy really did no favors for the fan base or the franchise itself. In fact, it pretty much tore the fan base asunder, and left most average viewers looking at the franchise and thinking, meh at best. At least that's what I've heard from the vast majority of people I've talked to about Star Wars, who are on the more casual fan side. And you better believe everybody I know in my personal life loves to ask me Star Wars questions, or to give their opinion or take on it. And especially when you consider the absolute insane buzz around The Force Awakens, and I mean before, during, and after it came out, Star Wars Episode 9, if Episode 8 had been done right, should have easily been an absolute slam dunk not only at the box office, but for the mark it left on pop culture itself. It should have rivaled Avengers Endgame both in terms of popularity and financial success, but it of course fell way short on both those fronts. And again, of all the things Disney needed to get right, or Lucasfilm under Disney if you prefer, it was those 3 movies. But I'm not here to be all doom and gloom. There's few things I want to see more in this world, outside of big things like world peace, ending hunger and poverty, than for Star Wars to be done right and for the fans to all come together and to just enjoy it again. Or the vast majority of fans, since you will never make every single one of them happy. And though yes, I think The Mandalorian went a long way in making things right again, until maybe the whole Gina Carano incident that chased away some fans, I do think there are 2 coming events that could very quickly turn things around again for Star Wars. 2 things that pretty much must happen. The first, and I'll only touch on this briefly because I've talked about it many times before in other videos, is a new president of Lucasfilm is needed. Kathleen Kennedy has to go. A president is needed with a true long-term plan and vision for the franchise. Someone who loves it and understands it, and knows why or understands why fans also love it. And that just isn't Kennedy, in my opinion. Plus, there are a great many fans who, for better or worse, will stay away from the franchise just because of her. And if you want to argue she's done a good job or that it's not fair fans are chasing her away, I take it back to what I said about Star Wars Episode 9 and that it could have and should have been on the same level of success as Endgame, and it was her job to make that happen, and it simply did not. Also, when you step back and look at it, this is the perfect time for someone new to step in, and do keep in mind Kennedy's contract expires this coming September, so we should be hearing news about her future and the future of Lucasfilm very soon, one way or the other. But anyway, now with the sequel trilogy over, and with a whole slew of shows coming to Disney+, it's the perfect time to make a change at the top, to have someone take the franchise into the future. Let those who love the sequel trilogy be able to forever look back at her time fondly and claim she paved the way for all the good things to come if they want to, while everyone who didn't like the sequels can just be happy she's gone and give the credit for the future to Filoni or Favreau or whoever else. As long as what comes out is henceforth good, I don't really care if people want to argue over who deserves credit or blame for any of it. I can just be happy to have good Star Wars again. Anyway, the other big thing that Disney and Lucasfilm have to get right is the upcoming Kenobi series, which begins filming this month and should be out sometime next year. And I really hope Disney and Lucasfilm understand just how important this series is, how important it is to get right. And I'm not just talking from the lore perspective, though it very much is important to the lore, since Obi-Wan's story in many ways is the backbone of the Skywalker saga. He's the reason it all happens and carries on. But this is also important because, outside of maybe Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi is easily the most popular and beloved character in all of Star Wars. He even spans and connects all generations of fans, having been in the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and then in the Clone Wars as well. And people tend to like all 3 versions of him. Usually even original trilogy fans who don't like the prequels can acknowledge that Ewan McGregor made for a fantastic Obi-Wan. And so a series that gets him and this story during this time period right is something that could really bring fans together and unify them, because everyone loves Kenobi and everyone wants to love this series, and a lot of people want to forget the past. And there are good early signs like Deborah Chow directing all 6 episodes, and she did a fantastic job with her episodes of The Mandalorian. There's also the return of Hayden Christensen to play Darth Vader, and hopefully some flashbacks of Anakin Skywalker as well. It also seems like this story could center around Obi-Wan figuring out how to commune with Qui-Gon Jinn. A new Star Wars book has stated it took Obi-Wan 10 years to finally contact Qui-Gon, which is the exact same time the show will be taking place. And I think most of us fans can agree contacting Qui-Gon should be a big or central part of this story, seeing that sort of transition from the Obi-Wan we saw at the end of the prequels to the one we see in Rebels and that final duel with Maul, as well as in A New Hope then. Now, all that said and wanting to be optimistic here, it is still playing with fire to do the series, even if it is something fans have been asking for forever now. Getting it wrong or getting the story wrong will pretty much anger every single Star Wars fan. Again, everyone loves Kenobi. But getting it right could of course do the opposite. It could really bring the fan base together once more, and that coupled with a new president of Lucasfilm could mean a very bright and happy future for Star Wars and its fans. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. Are those the 2 keys to saving Star Wars? How important is them getting the Kenobi series right to you personally? And what about Kennedy? Does she have to go or not? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.